The Baron's betrayal. The night was dark and heavy with silence. A cold wind swept across the barren courtyard where the auction was about to begin. Torches flickered along the walls, their flames casting long shadows that looked like monsters. Stretching across the ground, in the center stood a young alien girl, her wrists bound by iron chains. Her face pale, but her eyes still burning with quiet fire. She had been the Baron's property since childhood. He had taken her from her people, trained her to serve, and treated her as nothing more than a tool. Now, when she had grown stronger and wiser, he decided to sell her. To him she was not a person, but a prize to be traded. The Baron's voice echoed through the courtyard, deep and cruel. "She is strong, she is loyal, and she will obey," he declared to the crowd of merchants and mercenaries. "She will make a fine servant or perhaps a weapon if you know how to train her." The crowd murmured with interest, gold coins clinking in greedy hands. The girl's heart pounded. She felt the weight of 100 eyes staring at her. Every breath reminded her that she was nothing more than property here. She wanted to scream, but she knew no one would listen. Her gaze fell upon the Baron, standing tall in his jeweled coat. He smiled as if this night was a celebration. For him, her life was just another transaction. For her, it was the end of everything she had ever known. The bidding began. Voices rose one after another, numbers climbing higher and higher. Each offer was a nail in the coffin of her freedom. She closed her eyes, trying not to hear, trying not to break. But then, through the chaos, a new voice spoke. It was not loud, but it carried strength. It was calm, steady, and unlike the others. It did not sound greedy. The voice said simply, "I will pay more." The crowd fell silent. Heads turned toward the stranger. A human stood at the edge of the courtyard, wrapped in a dark cloak, his face hidden beneath the hood. He stepped forward slowly, his presence sharp and commanding. The Baron frowned. Few humans dared to enter this market. Even fewer had the courage to bid against him. But this man showed no fear. "What will you do with her, human?" The Baron asked mockingly. "She is dangerous. She is stubborn. She will never obey you." The man raised his head, his eyes gleaming under the torchlight. "I will give her a place where she belongs," he said firmly. The girl opened her eyes, stunned. For the first time, someone spoke of giving, not taking. Her chains felt heavier, but her heart stirred with something she had not felt in years. Hope. Could this human truly mean what he said, or was it another cruel trick? The bidding war continued, furious and loud. Wealthy merchants raised the price higher, their greed desperate. But the human never backed down. With every challenge he answered calmly, "More." The Baron's anger grew. This was his auction, his power, his control. Yet this human dared to challenge him in front of everyone. The Baron's pride burned hotter than the torches. At last, no one else could compete. The final price was declared, higher than any slave had ever been sold for. The Baron, forced to yield, clenched his jaw in rage. The girl was handed over, chains and all, to the mysterious human. The courtyard buzzed with whispers. Who was this man? Why spend so much on one slave when thousands could be bought for less? Some said he was mad, others said he had a plan. The girl walked beside him, her steps unsteady. She kept her eyes on the ground, afraid to believe. The human did not push her, did not pull her. He simply walked, silent but sure, as if he already knew the path ahead. Behind them, the Baron watched with hatred in his eyes. He was not a man to forgive. He had been challenged, humiliated, and defied. And he swore that night he would take back what was his. The girl felt the Baron's gaze burning into her back. She knew this was not the end. Her story was only beginning, but she also knew one thing: this human had changed her fate. For the first time in her life, she was being led away, not into darkness, but towards something unknown, something that might be freedom. Something that might be destiny. And the chains on her wrist suddenly felt lighter. A stranger's shelter. The road away from the Baron's courtyard was long and silent. The girl walked with her wrists still bound, her chains clinking softly in the night. Beside her, the human moved with calm steps, his cloak shifting with the wind. He did not speak, yet his silence felt stronger than the loudest voices she had ever heard. The girl's mind was filled with fear. Why had he bought her, and for so much gold? No human had ever shown kindness to her kind. Every memory she carried was filled with betrayal, cruelty, and pain. Her heart whispered a warning. This is a trap. He will use you like the Baron did. But another voice inside, quieter yet stubborn, whispered back, what if he is different? At last they reached a small shelter built into the side of a hill. It was not grand like the Baron's estate. It was simple. A home shaped from stone and wood. Lanterns glowed warmly from the windows, casting golden light into the cold night. The human stopped and turned toward her. You are safe here, he said, his voice steady. He reached into his cloak and pulled a small tool. With a few clicks, the locks on her chains fell open. The weight dropped from her wrists. She rubbed her skin, staring at the red marks left behind. For the first time in years, her hands were free. She wanted to thank him, but the words froze on her tongue. He opened the door and stepped inside. For a moment she hesitated, her body frozen at the threshold. She had never walked into a place freely before. Every home she had known belonged to someone else. But here, the door was open for her. Inside, the air was warm, filled with the smell of cooked food and burning wood. A small fire crackled in the hearth. Shelves lined the walls, holding tools, books, and strange artifacts from distant worlds. It was the home of someone who had traveled far, someone who carried many stories. The human handed her a bowl of food. Eat, he said simply. She lifted the bowl with trembling hands. The taste was plain, yet to her it was richer than any feast. Because it was given without cruelty, she watched him closely as he sat near the fire, removing his hood. His face was lined with scars, his eyes sharp yet kind. There was no greed in his expression, no hunger for control. He looked at her not as property, but as a person. Why did you buy me? She asked finally, her voice breaking the silence. The question had been burning in her chest since the courtyard. He looked into the fire before answering. Because you deserve more than chains, he said. Her heart skipped. The words sounded impossible. No one had ever said such a thing to her. She wanted to believe. But the shadow of doubt clung tightly. That night, as the fire dimmed, she lay awake on a simple bedroll he had given her. She could not sleep. Every sound of the night reminded her of the Baron's men. Every flicker of light reminded her of betrayal. And yet, when she looked across the room and saw the human sitting watchful by the fire, her heart felt strangely calmer. The days that followed were filled with quiet tension. He never forced her to do anything. He gave her space, food, and rest. He asked for nothing in return, and this, more than anything, confused her. She tested him in small ways. She pretended to refuse food, expecting anger, but he only set it aside and said, "When you are ready." She asked sharp questions, expecting harsh answers, but he only spoke plainly, never raising his voice. Slowly, she began to trust, though she did not admit it. Her body, once tense like a trapped animal, started to relax. Her eyes, once filled with fear, began to wander curiously across his shelves of artifacts. She found strange weapons, maps of stars, and journals filled with human writing she could not read. One day, he placed something before her. It was not food, not a chain, but a weapon, a blade. The metal shimmered faintly as though alive. She stared at it, unable to move. "Why give me this?" she whispered. He looked at her firmly. "Because you will need to fight for yourself one day," he said. "And when that day comes, you must be ready." Her hands trembled as she lifted the blade. It felt heavier than she imagined. Yet it also felt right. For the first time she held power in her hands, not slavery. The firelight reflected on the weapon, casting a glow on her face. She looked at him with new eyes. Perhaps he was not her captor, not her enemy. Perhaps he was the first step towards something she could not yet see. The thought scared her, but it also gave her strength. Far away, the Baron was gathering his men. His pride had been wounded, his fury sharp. He had not forgotten her, nor the human who had stolen his prize. The night of betrayal was only the beginning. The storm of revenge was already on its way. The blade of choice. The girl stared at the blade resting in her hands. It was unlike any weapon she had ever seen. The metal was not dull or crude like the Baron's swords. It shimmered with a faint silver glow, as if it carried a light of its own. Her fingers traced the strange markings carved along the hilt. They looked ancient, symbols she did not understand. When her skin brushed the runes, the blade pulsed faintly, almost like it was alive, almost like it recognized her. She looked at the human, suspicion filling her voice. "Why give this to me?" she asked. His gaze was steady, his voice calm. "Because you must learn to protect yourself," he said. "I cannot fight all your battles for you." The words cut deeper than the edge of the sword. No one had ever spoken to her as if she had a choice. She had always been told what to do, ordered where to go, forced to obey. But now, for the first time, someone was telling her she could fight back. Still, fear lingered. Her hands shook as she held the blade. She remembered the punishments from the Baron whenever she disobeyed. She remembered the cruelty that came when she tried to resist. Could she really hold a weapon without facing the same pain again? The human rose from his seat and walked into the courtyard behind his shelter. The night sky stretched wide above them, filled with cold stars. He picked up a wooden staff and stood across from her. "Show me," he said simply. She hesitated, but something inside urged her forward. Her bare feet touched the dirt ground, her grip tight on the blade. He did not attack, only raised his staff to defend. Her first swing was clumsy, weak, her strength wasted on fear. The staff blocked easily. Her arms trembled from the recoil. The human did not laugh, did not mock. He only nodded. Again, she tried once more, faster this time. Her swing carried anger at the Baron, anger at her chains, anger at her years of pain. The strike was stronger, sharper, but still wild. Again, he blocked. Without effort, her chest heaved with frustration. "Why does it not work?" she cried. The human lowered his staff, his eyes sharp but patient. "Because you are fighting with anger, not with purpose," he said. His words struck something deep within her. She had always thought strength came from rage. The Baron had taught her that pain was power, but this human was telling her a different truth. "Hold the blade again," he said, "not as a weapon of hate, but as a shield of choice." She looked down at the shimmering sword for the first time. She wondered, was it meant for her all along? She closed her eyes and lifted the blade. Her breathing slowed, her heartbeat steady. This time when she moved, the blade felt lighter. Her strike cut through the air cleanly, sharp but controlled. The human staff met it, and sparks danced from the impact. The glow of the blade flared brighter. He smiled faintly, the first real smile she had seen from him. "You are learning," he said. Her chest filled with something she had never known before, pride. Not the pride of a master who owned her, but the pride of knowing she had done something herself. The sword felt less like a gift and more like a part of her. Night after night, they trained. She stumbled, she failed, but each time she rose again. Her arms grew stronger, her strikes cleaner, her steps sharper. The human taught her not just how to fight, but how to choose her battles. One evening, as the stars blazed above them, she asked softly, "Why me?" He looked at her for a long moment before answering. "Because I see strength in you that others tried to bury," he said. "Because you deserve the chance to choose your own path." Her throat tightened. No one had ever given her such words. She felt the weight of her past, the chains, the auction, the Baron's cruelty, but now, holding the glowing blade, she felt the future pressing forward too. Yet the shadows of danger were not far away. The Baron's spies had already traced her steps. Whispers of the human and the girl with the glowing weapon spread through the villages. The Baron's fury grew, and he vowed to take back what he lost. As she stood in the courtyard, her blade glowing faintly in the dark. She knew her journey had only begun. For the first time she was not running, not hiding, she was preparing, because soon the Baron would come for her, and this time she would not bow. Training and trust. The days turned into weeks, and the girl's life changed in ways she had never imagined. No longer was she locked in chains. No longer did she sleep on cold stone floors. Here, in the shelter of the human, she woke each morning to the sound of birds and the warmth of fire. But freedom felt strange, almost frightening, because she did not know what to do with it. The human became her teacher. Every morning he took her into the courtyard where the earth was scarred with their practice strikes. He carried his wooden staff while she held the glowing blade. At first her movements were wild, driven by anger and fear, but slowly, under his guidance, they began to shape into something stronger. He taught her how to stand, how to breathe, how to strike with precision instead of rage. Your enemy will not fear your anger, he said, his voice calm as always. They will only fear your control. His words sank into her heart, though they were hard to accept. She stumbled often, her strikes sloppy, her steps unsure. The blade felt heavy some days, and she wanted to throw it aside. But each time she faltered. The human only said one word, again. There was no cruelty in his voice, no punishment waiting for her failure. That alone unsettled her. She had grown used to pain as a teacher. Now she was learning through patience, and it was harder then. The whip at night, she sat near the fire, watching him mend tools or sharpen weapons. He rarely spoke of himself. But she saw the scars that lined his arms, scars of battles long past, scars that told her he had lived through pain too. She wanted to ask about them, but something in his eyes warned her not to dig too deep. Not yet. Slowly, trust began to grow. Between them, fragile like glass, she found herself listening to his advice, even when pride burned inside her. When he showed her how to move silently in the forest, she copied him step by step. When he taught her how to strike not with strength, but with speed, she repeated until her muscles ached. And still, she wondered why. Why did he care to train her? Why did he risk the Baron's wrath for someone like her? One evening, when the firelight painted the walls gold, she finally asked, "Why are you doing this for me?" The human looked at her across the flames, his face calm but shadowed. "Because no one else would," he said. "Because I know what it is to be trapped, and I will not let you remain broken." The words struck her deeper than any blade, and for the first time, she looked at him not with suspicion, but with something like respect. Her strength grew, and so did her courage. She learned to parry his strikes, to dodge his blows, and sometimes even to surprise him with her speed. Each victory lit a spark in her chest, a spark of pride she had never known. But training was not only about the blade. The human taught her discipline, how to wait, how to watch, how to listen. Patience is sharper than steel, he said one night as they tracked the steps of a deer through the forest. Rage blinds you, patience guides you. She held onto those words, though they clashed with the fire. In her heart, still, shadows gathered on the horizon. The Baron's spies had not stopped hunting. Whispers spread of a girl with a glowing sword. Whispers that reached the Baron's ears and stoked his fury, and though she felt stronger, she knew danger was drawing closer with every passing day. One night, as she sat alone outside the shelter, she saw movement among the trees. Her hand tightened on the blade at her side, her body tense. But it was only the human, returning from a scouting trip, his cloak heavy with dust. He looked at her and nodded, as though testing her vigilance. "You are ready for more," he said, his voice low. "Ready for what?" she asked, though her heart already guessed. "For the fight that is coming," he answered. His words carried no doubt, no fear, only certainty. The girl felt the weight of the glowing blade in her hand. It no longer felt like a burden, no longer like a gift she did not deserve. It felt like a part of her. And though her trust in the human was not yet complete, she knew one thing. She was no longer the same broken slave who had stood in chains at the Baron's auction. She was learning, she was changing, and for the first time, she was ready to face what was coming, but far away, the Baron was gathering. Mercenaries, men with steel, ships with fire, and vengeance burning in their hearts. The girl's training had given her strength, but soon, her trust in the human would be tested in the fire of battle. The night wind carried the smell of storm and smoke, and as she stood in the courtyard with her blade glowing faintly in the dark, she whispered to herself, "I am not his property anymore." Her voice trembled, but it carried truth, and the human, hearing her words, gave the faintest smile, because he knew, at last she was beginning to believe. The Baron's revenge far from the shelter of the human. The Baron stood in his hall of stone. His face was twisted with fury. His pride burned hotter than fire. He had been shamed before his men, before his merchants, before the world. A human had dared to defy him. And worse had taken the girl he belonged to him. To the Baron, it was not about gold. It was not about the girl alone. It was about power. Power meant control. And control meant fear. If one man could steal from him and go unpunished, then his rule was nothing. He summoned mercenaries from distant cities, men with scars, eyes cold as steel, and loyalty bought with gold. He promised them riches, weapons, and land if they brought the girl back. But in secret, he whispered of punishment. He did not want her alive. He wanted her broken. And he wanted the human to watch her fall. While the Baron plotted, the girl's days were filled with training. Her blade grew sharper, her movements cleaner, her courage steadier. The human tested her in the forests, in the rivers, even on the cliffs where the wind howled like a beast. Each lesson hardened her, but no lesson could prepare her for the storm that was already on its way. The first signs came quietly, tracks in the mud, broken branches in the forest. The human noticed before she did, his eyes always sharper. "We are being watched," he said one evening as they sat near the fire. Her heart froze, but she did not argue, because deep down she felt it too. The Baron's men struck at dawn. The air filled with the sound of hooves and boots, with the clash of steel and the roar of voices. The shelter that had felt safe now shook with chaos. The girl clutched her blade, its glow flickering like a heartbeat. The human met the attack with steady force, his movements calm and deadly. He fought not like a man of anger, but like one who had seen war 100 times before. Each strike of his staff knocked enemies down. Each step was measured, but there were too many, far more than she had ever faced. She swung her blade wildly at first, fear gripping her chest. The mercenaries laughed, their eyes cruel. "You think a slave can fight us?" one shouted as his sword clashed against hers. But when her blade sparked and flared with light, the laughter turned into silence. For a moment, even she was shocked. The sword pulsed in her grip, guiding her hands, turning clumsy strikes into sharp blows. She drove one mercenary back, his weapon shattered by the glowing steel. Her chest burned with new fire. She was not powerless anymore. Yet the battle was far from victory. The Baron's forces surrounded the shelter, fire spreading along the wooden walls. The human called out, "Stay with me," his voice strong against the storm. She fought at his side, but the tide pressed harder, the circle of enemies tightening. The Baron himself arrived, draped in black and gold, his eyes burning with hatred. He rode at the front of his men, his voice sharp like a whip. "Bring her to me," he commanded, his gaze locked on the girl, as if she were still his possession. To him, nothing had changed, but to her, everything had. The girl's hands shook, not from fear, but from fury. The memories of chains, of whips, of being sold like an object surged inside her. Her blade pulsed brighter, glowing against the smoke-filled sky. She raised it high and shouted, "I am not yours anymore." The Baron's laughter cut through the battlefield. "You are nothing without me," he sneered. But his words no longer reached her heart. The human stood beside her, steady as stone. And together they faced the tide of mercenaries that closed in. The battle raged with fire and steel. Every strike tested her will, every breath tested her strength. Her arms ached, her body bled, but she did not fall, because for the first time, she was not fighting for survival alone. She was fighting for choice, for freedom, for the life she had been denied. Still, the numbers pressed harder, the circle grew tighter, the Baron's mercenaries fought like wolves. And even the human was forced back step by step. The shelter cracked and burned behind them. Smoke filled the air, choking, blinding. And as the fire roared, the girl realized this was not just a fight, this was a test of everything she had learned, a test of her trust in the human who had given her a blade, a test of her strength against the man who had stolen her past. And as the Baron raised his own weapon to strike, the world seemed to hold its breath. Asterisk, the destiny revealed, the battlefield burned with smoke and fire. Sparks flew with every clash of steel, and the Baron's laughter echoed above the chaos. Girl stood trembling, her blade glowing brighter with each heartbeat. Her breath came fast, but her eyes were steady, fixed on the man who had stolen her life. The Baron dismounted, stepping toward her. His armor black and heavy, his weapon gleamed red under the flames. A curved blade forged to cut down any who dared resist him. "You cannot escape your fate," he hissed, his voice sharp as poison. "You belong to me." Her chest tightened, memories of chains and whips flooding her mind. For a moment, her grip faltered, but then she felt the warmth of the blade in her hand, the faint hum that pulsed against her skin. It was as if the sword itself was reminding her she was no longer bound. The human moved to stand beside her, staff raised, eyes locked on the Baron. "You will not take her again," he said firmly, his voice calm but filled with steel. The Baron sneered. "You think one man and one broken slave can stop me?" But even as he mocked, his eyes flickered toward the glowing weapon. The mercenaries closed in, their circle tightening. The girl's fear twisted into fire. She lifted the blade high, and this time it blazed with light. Stronger than before, the mercenaries hesitated, their steps slowing, because this was no ordinary sword. With a cry, she struck forward. The blade cut through steel like paper, shattering weapons and shields. The glow wrapped around her arms, guiding her strikes, turning her fear into precision. The men who had mocked her now fell back in shock. The Baron roared, charging at her, his curved blade raised. Steel met light with a crack like thunder. The ground shook as the two weapons clashed, sparks flying between them. The girl's arms nearly buckled, but she held firm, her eyes locked on his. "You are nothing," the Baron spat, forcing her back step by step. But the human struck from the side, his staff hitting the Baron's shoulder, staggering him. "Stand!" The human called to her, his voice steady, and she did, her blade flashing upward with renewed strength. Something deep inside her awakened. The runes on the sword flared to life, burning brighter than fire. Images filled her mind, warriors she had never met, voices of a people long gone. The sword was not just a weapon, it was a legacy, a gift passed through generations, waiting for someone to wield it with purpose. Her knees shook, but her spirit surged. She realized now why the human had given it to her. It was never about the blade alone. It was about her, about who she could become. The Baron struck again, his fury wild. But this time she did not stumble. She moved with clarity. Her strikes clean, her defense sharp. The glowing blade cut across his armor, tearing through layers of steel. The Baron staggered back, his face pale with disbelief. Around them, the mercenaries faltered, fear spreading like fire in dry grass. They had come for a slave, but what they faced was something far greater. The human fought beside her, steady and unyielding, his movements precise. Together, they turned the tide. Step by step, strike by strike. The Baron fell to one knee, his weapon trembling in his hands. His eyes blazed with hatred, but also fear. "You were mine," he gasped. Blood on his lips, but the girl raised her blade high, its light shining across the burning battlefield. "No," she said, her voice steady, her spirit unbroken. I was never yours." And with one final strike, she shattered his blade, sending him crashing to the ground. Silence fell over the field, broken only by the crackle of fire and the groans of fleeing mercenaries. The Baron lay defeated, his power broken, his pride turned to dust. The girl stood tall, the glowing sword steady in her grip, her chest heaving with breath. She had not only fought him, she had overcome him. The human stepped closer, his eyes calm but proud. "You see now," he said softly. She looked at him, the weight of everything pressing down. Her arms ached, her body bled, but inside her, something new had taken root, destiny. She had thought herself a slave, thought her life would always belong to someone else, but now she knew the truth. She was meant for more. The blade had chosen her, and through it, she had chosen herself. As the flames died and the last mercenaries fled, the girl raised her sword to the sky. The light burned bright, casting away the smoke and shadow, and in that glow she felt not fear, but purpose. The Baron's revenge had failed, but her true journey had only begun. A new purpose. The battlefield was silent now, broken only by the crackle of dying flames. The Baron lay defeated in the ashes of his pride, his army scattered, his power gone. The girl stood in the middle of the ruin, her glowing blade still humming softly in her hand. For the first time in her life, the weight on her shoulders felt lighter. The mercenaries who had once surrounded her now fled into the night. None dared to look back, none dared to challenge the girl who had faced the Baron and lived. She watched them go, her chest rising with heavy breaths. They had come to drag her into chains, but instead they had witnessed her rebirth. The human walked to her side, his cloak torn, his staff chipped, his body marked with cuts, but his eyes held no fear, only calm pride. "You stood your ground," he said, his voice steady. "You chose to fight." She lowered the blade slowly, staring at its faint light. The runes glowed softly, no longer blazing. As though resting, it felt like the sword itself approved of her choice. Like it had been waiting for this moment, for her to accept what she was meant to be. Tears pricked her eyes, not of weakness, but of release. For years she had carried chains, for years she had been told she was nothing. Yet here she stood, alive, free, and stronger than ever before. She turned to the human, her voice trembling but firm. "You gave me more than freedom," she whispered. "You gave me a future." The human said nothing at first, only looked at her with steady eyes, but she could see in his silence what he meant, that the path ahead was hers to walk. He had given her tools, shelter, and guidance, but her destiny would be shaped by her own choices. The days that followed were filled with change. The shelter they had built together stood scarred by fire, but it was still standing. She helped him rebuild, stone by stone, plank by plank. Her hands, once forced into labor, now worked freely, and every swing of her arm reminded her she was not a slave anymore. Villagers from nearby lands came to see her. They whispered of the girl with the glowing blade, the girl who had slain the Baron's pride. Some looked at her with awe, others with fear, but all carried the same question: who was she and what would she become at night? She thought of those still living under chains. She thought of others like her, bought and sold as if they were objects. Her heart ached, but it also burned with resolve. She could not free the whole galaxy at once, but she could begin. Step by step, one battle at a time. One evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, she stood with the human on the hill above the shelter. The glowing blade rested at her side, its light catching the colors of the sky. She looked at him, her voice quiet but certain. "I am not finished," she said. "This fight is only the beginning." The human nodded, his gaze steady. "You have a destiny," he said. "Not the one the Baron forced on you, but the one you choose." His words settled into her heart like seeds taking root. She lifted the sword high, the runes flashing. Once more, the light stretched across the land, a beacon in the gathering dark. In that moment, she was no longer a girl sold by a Baron. No longer a slave, no longer a prisoner of chains. She was a warrior, she was a leader, and though the road ahead was filled with danger, she knew it was hers to walk. Others would follow, others would rise, and together they would break the chains that bound their kind. The wind carried her words far into the night as she whispered, "I am free," and for the first time, the stars above seemed to shine brighter, not in pity, not in silence, but in recognition, as if the universe itself had been waiting for her voice. The Baron's reign had ended, but her story had only begun, a story not of chains, but of choice, not of slavery, but of destiny. And as she turned from the hill, the human walking beside her, the glowing blade at her side, she stepped forward into a future she had claimed for herself.